Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are going to continue reading The Little Princesses because it's been way too long since we've read a chapter. So I'm not going to say much. Let's just jump right into it. This chapter, chapter 3, is entitled The Clothes of the Rain. I was at 145 Piccadilly for 4 years. Lilibet was now 10. She was a long, slender, very beautifully made child with a mop of golden hair. No two children had a simpler outlook on life. Early bed and very few treats or outings, and those of an extremely unsophisticated nature were the common rule. They never went to the seaside yearly, as most other English children do. They had one pantomime a year. In those happy pre-war days, theater managers always had a large box of chocolates in the royal box, but the little girl's great ambition was to sit in the stalls or the dress circle. They had to hang over the side of the royal box to see properly. I can still see the Duke anxiously seizing his daughter's petticoats, afraid they would fall over altogether in their immense enthusiasm. The children looked forward to these pantomimes for the remaining 11 months of the year. Margaret, as soon as she could talk at all, would reenact most of the parts for her own edification in a corner of the nursery. They always went to the horse show at Olympia with their parents, after which the toy horses round the dome would be put through several weeks of intensive training. They seldom had other children to tea. It was a quiet and homelike life, the children seeing a great deal more of their parents than most London society children do. We learned to dance reels. Both the Duke and Duchess used to come in after lunch occasionally and join in. In winter, we used to open all the communicating doors and play hide-and-seek over the whole house. In those early years, I saw very little of King George and Queen Mary. We always looked for their pictures in the newspapers, and Margaret used to lie on her tummy in the schoolroom floor and carefully pick them out. The Princess Royal, Aunt Mary, the Duke's sister, came now and again to tea, but not very often. She was an ultra-devoted mother and seldom left her two little boys. The Prince of Wales, Uncle David, was perhaps the most constant visitor. He was very fond of his brother, and he was devoted to Lilibet. He often took part in their after-tea games, Snap, and Happy Families. He gave Lilibet all the A. A. Milne children's books, Winnie the Pooh, When We Were Very Young, and the others. Both little girls knew most of the poems by heart, and needless to say, their favorite one was Changing the Guard at Buckingham Palace. The Duke and Duchess rarely dined out. In the evening, the happy bath hour over, the children bedded, and the day's work done, they would sit one each side of the fireplace like any other young married couple, happy in each other, not requiring any outside diversion. The Duke was astonishingly expert with a needle. He once made a dozen chair covers in petite point for Royal Lodge. Oh, wow, I had no idea. I remember he got rather tired of filling in the background, so I obliged with that while he went on with the more amusing part of the design. Rarely was there a dinner party. They were happiest alone. As in those days they had fewer social obligations, they were able to do as they wished. They seldom went to the cinema or a theater. The high spot of the day remained the bedtime hour. Honestly, this life sounds so glorious. Like, no wonder Elizabeth's mother was angry at David for the rest of her life. You know, this life, oh my gosh, I could thrive in that life. Imagine just having your sweet little house and your sweet little girls and just all the help you want. And, you know, they're just able to sit by the fire in the evening and read, and they're just so content. Oh, I mean, you can tell how introverted they actually were, you know, when you read this, because they're not having parties, they're not going to parties, they're not going to the theater. They just want to be home, like they're homebodies. Oh, I would be in heaven. Anyway, okay. The high spot of the day remained the bedtime hour. I almost said bath time. The children had their tea at 5, and contrary to the usual English custom, which ends nursery meals there, except for a glass of milk and some biscuits, had quite a substantial supper just before bedtime. They always ended up with an apple while they sat up in bed. That's so cute. After tea, they joined their parents. Endless games of rummy and racing demon went on till 6 or half past. When Allah came for Margaret, racing demon is a card game that must be played very quickly. The cards are laid out on a table and have to be snatched up, the one who gets all her cards first being the winner. there always entailed a good deal of scratching, rather in the way of honorable wounds received in battle. That sounds like a fun game. When both children were in the bath, the Duke and Duchess would go upstairs to them. Hilarious sounds of splashing could be heard coming from the bathroom. Later, pillow fights in the bedroom would set Ella begging them not to get the children too excited. There was a weighing machine in the nursery, where weights and measures were ceremoniously noted down. Perhaps they still are, but from a different angle now. Then, arm in arm, the young parents would go downstairs, heated and disheveled, and frequently rather damp, under the big dome with its circle of horses. The children called to them as they went until the final door closed. "Good night, Mummy. Good night, Papa." After dinner at 8:15, the Duke and Duchess would mostly sit by the fire and talk, or read. I dined in my own room, free to go out if I chose, or to have a friend to dinner with me in the schoolroom. The Duke and Duchess went to bed about midnight. They were always called at 8 in the morning. Oh my gosh, what a nice life. That's a nice life. Oh my. Okay. I think, being the second son is where it's at. Harry, let us not forget, Harry could be living this life. Anyway, but he's not. Ugh. Okay. Little did any of us dream then how one day, not so far distant, a bomb was to drop through that same glass dome and reduce the happy house to a heap of rubble. Where once it stood, there is now a gap in the row of houses on the terrace, like a missing tooth in a smile. Only the ground floor has been rebuilt. It was, I believe, a worry to Queen Mary that the custom of family prayers, still upheld at the palace, was not kept at 145 Piccadilly. The Duke and Duchess had allowed this sometimes uncomfortable ceremony to lapse, but there was something about that house that was in the best sense deeply religious, though perhaps not entirely conventionally so. The Duchess read her children Bible stories and taught them their collects and psalms as she herself had been taught them in the old Scottish paraphrase version that we who come from north of the border find so much more beautiful because it is what we are accustomed to. It was at Royal Lodge, Windsor, during one of our happy weekends, that I discovered the children had considerable talent for acting. It started one day in the woods there when we played charades. Just the three of us. One-man charades, in which each of us took a turn to act someone we knew, and the others had to guess who it was. There was never any doubt about Margaret's efforts. They were unmistakable. She kept us in fits of laughter with this first manifestation of a talent that was one day to amuse a much larger circle. The gift of fun-poking, and very clever fun-poking, Margaret had from an early age in very large quantity. Lilibet never had it to anything like the same extent. Okay, sorry, sometimes her phrasing. She was always a more serious child, though she, like her Aunt Mary, had a dry, humorous way of putting things. Margaret's imagination led her along strange paths. Her dreams were appalling, and the telling of them was one of her ways of postponing the start of an unpopular lesson or some chore she disliked. Just as in earlier days she had used the handy Cousin Halifax, it was now, "Crawfie, I must tell you an amazing dream I had last night," and Lilibet would listen with me enthralled as the account of green horses, wild elephant stampedes, talking cats, and other remarkable manifestations went into 2 or 3 installments. Margaret was never at a loss. One of her early sayings achieved immortality. When she was still a very young child, J.M. Barrie came over to tea at Glamis from Kirriemuir, which he had made immortal under the name of Thrums. While they were at tea, there was a cracker laying on the plate between them, and he asked the little girl jokingly whether it belonged to him or to her. Margaret said gracefully, "It is yours and mine." J.M. Barrie put that line into his play, The Boy David, and he gave Margaret 1 penny for every time it was used on the stage. The tale soon got about, and did a great deal to disperse the story of Margaret's being deaf and dumb. After Barrie died, Lady Cynthia Asquith, who had been his secretary for many years, came to Buckingham Palace and brought Margaret all the pennies owed to her in a bag. Christmas was always looked forward to and prepared for months ahead. The Duchess would take the children shopping at Harrods. The children made their shopping lists well ahead. The bulk of their purchases, however, came from Woolworths. We went round the store ourselves and bought china ornaments, sweets, and pages of colored stick-on scraps and transfers. They were unsophisticated about presents, and the smallest gift gave an immense amount of pleasure. After they outgrew... See, doesn't that give a little insight into the royals when they're talking about the kind of gifts that they give people? They give very unsophisticated presents, but they're just very useful, And so where people think that they're just being mean, being miserly, rather, I should say, you can kind of see from this that this is kind of always the norm, And I think that's lovely, personally. Actually, so is this almost done? Oh, I thought the chapter's ending, so I was like, well, I might as well talk. My boyfriend was talking to me the other day, and we were talking about Christmas, and I said, well, I have your Christmas present picked up. It's not going to arrive until after Christmas because it has to come from Britain. Anyway, and he was like, well, I've been thinking about what I'm getting you for Christmas, he said, and I think I've thought of something, and it's very useful. And I think he's getting me, he has this screwdriver set that I have long admired, and I wonder if he's getting me a set of my own. He keeps it in the trunk of his car, and anytime he hauls it out to do something with it, I'm always like, oh, I just love that set of screwdrivers. So we'll find out. I ordered him a book, and I'm making him a scarf, although I'm wondering, as I look at the date, if the scarf will be finished in time. Okay. They were unsophisticated about presents, and the smallest gift gave an immense amount of pleasure. After they outgrew toy horses, books made up the great part of their gifts from Queen Mary and their uncles and aunts. Queen Mary gave them all the classics: Robert Louis Stevenson, Jane Austen, and Kipling. Others weighed in with book tokens. The Duke and Duchess gave them one small silver bracelet. Oh, I don't know why I'm adding words. The Duke and Duchess gave them small silver bracelets, such as all little girls love. One year, when they had been loaded with chocolates and all kinds of expensive presents, what pleased both of them more than anything else were small ladybird brooches given to them by Lilibet's nursemaid, Bobo. Aww. Lilibet used to help Margaret laboriously with her shopping and presents lists, and I found among my papers the other day one of these, written in Lilibet's hand to help Margaret write her thank you letters and remind her of what she had received and from whom it came. I give the list just as she wrote it. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will just try to, oh, you know what? That's not even going to show up. Oh my goodness, guys. Eventually I'm going to have to get a camera, a nice one, but that just seems silly. Can you sort of see that? Anyway, it says 2 columns, present and then given. So it's seesaw, mummy. Doll with dresses, mummy. Umbrella, papa. Brooch, mummy. Calendar, granny. Silver coffee pot, Lilibet. Clock. Puzzle. Yeah. So it has all this, There was always a great deal of consultation as to what should be given to Alla and Bobo. The latter, I seem to remember, came in for a lot of rather highly colored bath salts in her day. Making up the Christmas parcels was great fun, and much skillful maneuvering always went on, so that I should by no means guess what it was they had got for me. Once they gave me a small box for my mother. Inside was an elephant of ivory on a pin. On the back of the box was written the price. I have it to this day. Another year, the 2 children gave me a bead necklace made like bunches of grapes. I wish I had kept some of their letters written to Santa Claus. They were long and confiding, and the requests under the circumstances were most unambitious ones. Horses featured largely. Lilibet always got hold of Christmas catalogues and marked all the horsey books. When Christmas came, they duly hung out their stockings, and Papa and Mummy crept up, and at last the children slept. When at last the children slept to fill them. Oh my gosh, that just reminds me, I need to get a stocking for my man. Maybe I'll do that later. They always had, besides this, one of those made-up net stockings full of pleasant little rubbishes, comic books, whistles, little balls, small tin frying pans, and other nonsense. They loved these dearly, and kept all the empty ones year after year carefully put away. There came a time much later when they were all taken out and refilled for children in hospitals. Nothing was ever wasted. Lilibet had a large box into which she put every piece of ribbon off chocolate boxes and bouquets, neatly folded up to be used again, and she kept every piece of silk or pretty colored paper that took her fancy. Another thing they loved to do at Christmas time was to go down to the kitchens to help the cook, Mrs. MacDonald, whom they called Golly, perhaps because she did look a bit like a gollywog. To stir, I don't know what that is. I hope that's not something bad. Hold on. I'm like, do I have to edit this out? I don't know what it means. It does mean something bad. I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable. A gollywog is a soft doll with a black face, exaggerated mouth and eyes, fuzzy hair, and bright clothes. Oh, now widely regarded as an offensive, racist caricature. Oh, I'm sorry, but you know what? I'm leaving it in because I didn't know, and we're learning together. So I know exactly what it means too. Like now that I've read it, because I was thinking polywogs. What's a polywog? Polywog. A tadpole. That's what I was thinking. How awful. One letter difference. Okay, well, I beg your most pardon. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I'm not really going to beg your pardon because I didn't know what the word was and I had to look it up. So anyway, we've all learned together. Okay. To stir up the Christmas puddings. Golly made wonderful cakes for the blind soldiers, and we all used to help decorate them with silver horseshoes and bells, and those bright silver pills dear to confectioners. Golly had great boxes full of these things, and of colored jellied sweets, and in those old spacious days. A good bit of tasting was enjoyed by all. They were never greedy children. Their favorite sweet was a certain fudge that Bobo, the nursery maid, who is now Lilibet's personal maid, used to make for them in the kitchen from her own secret recipe which she guarded jealously. They were apt to hoard that and to be a little uneager to hand it round. In general, a complete absence of any kind of lavishness was the family rule. On Queen Mary's birthday, the children took her little Victorian posies. All the birthday presents would be laid out on Her Majesty's tables in her apartments. When we had made all our curtsies and she had kissed us, she would tell us we might choose from among them something for ourselves. Lilibet would scan the collection to see if there was anything there to do with the horse, and if not, choose some other small china animal or a little china dish. The presents the family gave and received were all very simple, with a personal touch. One felt the donors had always erred, if at all, on the side of economy. Oh, I love to hear this because it just puts so much context into this, because this was like railing, like, oh my gosh, they're so miserly. But this has been the norm, you know? Queen Mary, through all the years, was an immense help and comfort to me personally. I sent Lilibet's school schedule at the time to Queen Mary and received, in return, a number of helpful suggestions from Her Majesty. Lady Cynthia Colville replied on her behalf. She said that Queen Mary was intensely interested in the timetable and had commanded her to thank me very much for sending it. It had struck Her Majesty as being a wonderfully ingenious curriculum, considering how many subjects had to be included, and in view of the fact that the afternoons were devoted to dancing, music, exercise, etc. There were a few questions that had occurred to the Queen, and she would very much like to know what I thought about them. As regards to history, 2.5 hours a week seemed very little for this subject, but perhaps that couldn't be helped. But, for instance, was arithmetic really more valuable, anyhow, to them than history? These two would probably never have to do their own household books, but history. Princess Elizabeth's future career? Would it be worth while robbing a period or so of arithmetic to add to history? Of course, old-fashioned geography was hopelessly out of date, but for them, all the same, a rather detailed knowledge of physical geography might be valuable, and also of the dominions in India. Her Majesty felt that I had allotted too little time to Bible reading. Poetry. Did they ever learn poetry by heart? Rather an old-fashioned practice, too, and often overdone. But it was not But was not a little of it rather wonderfully memory training? And would it not help to get through a good deal of first-rate interesting stuff which otherwise they might never read? Her Majesty felt that genealogies, historical and dynastic, were very interesting to children, and for these children really important. Did they learn script writing? Her Majesty thought they wrote very well, but she had a great dislike for script. Lady Cynthia added that Queen Mary was anxious that I should receive these criticisms and comments in the kindly manner in which they were intended. She was thrilled about their education and, like me, wanted them to be absolutely perfect. Queen Mary's practical suggestions were most welcome, of course, and I revised the schoolroom schedule for Princess Elizabeth accordingly. Okay, here's the schedule, y'all. Okay, so Monday, starting at 9:30, Bible, 10 a.m. history, 10:30, grammar. Then 11 a.m. to 12, break for 11sies, orange juice, and games in Hamilton Gardens. And then 12 to 1, a rest, 1/2 hour for silent reading and 1/2 hour when I read to Princess Elizabeth. This covered a good deal of literature. And then in the afternoon, 1:15 is lunch, and then after lunch is dancing class or educational visit with Queen Mary. Tuesday, 9:30 is arithmetic, 10 a.m. grammar, 10:30 history, and then the same breaks, and then after 1:15 lunch on Tuesday is singing class at Lady Cavan's house and more walks or out to tea. Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. arithmetic, 10 a.m. geography, 10:30 literature. Then after lunchtime is drawing lesson. And then Thursday, 9:30 arithmetic, 10 a.m. history, 10:30 is poetry, and then after lunch is a music lesson. And then they're doing a lot of arithmetic. And then Friday morning is arithmetic, and then 10:30 is writing composition. 10:30 is history, and then after their lunch they go to Royal Lodge every Friday afternoon. And then Saturday from 9:30 to 11 is a resume of the week's work, and then general reading. 11 to 12:20 is writing. 1:15 is lunch, and then after lunch is out in the garden and park with Duke and Duchess. Later, it became extremely difficult to work to any definite plan. Lilibet was always being called away by Mummy or Papa. I had to adapt the work then and make any use of any spare moments I had. Ours was never an entirely conventional schoolroom, and from my point of view, the period at Burkall and the 5 years I had the children alone at Windsor were a godsend as far as the work were concerned. We were uninterrupted. During the morning break, we used to go to play in Hamilton Gardens, and the Duke often joined us. One of our favorite games, and one at which he excelled, was hopscotch, played on a roughly marked out court, which can be either chalked on stones or scratched with a stick on the ground. It is played with a nice flat stone, and the idea is to kick the stone from square to square, hopping meantime. Both your feet on the ground, and you are out. The Duke played with great precision of footwork, his daughters watching him critically. Lilibet never objected to her daily period of lying down, as long as it did not exceed half an hour. After that, she became restless. Hold on, I'm just seeing how much longer this chapter is. Holy smokes, girl. It is long. All right, we'll try to at least get a half hour done, but I doubt I'll be able to get the entire thing done because I really have got to get this house looked after. Okay. After that, she became restless. She was always allowed to read a book at this time. Though both children went to bed early, they did not always remain there. There was a good deal of romping about. The children's taste in books was a wide one, though for a long time the Black Beauty type of story held first place with both of them. They loved all the Dr. Dolittle stories by Hugh Lofting, and were, in common with children the world over, very sad when Mr. Lofting laid down his pen and firmly announced that there would be no more. They liked Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, but strangely enough never cared for Alice in Wonderland. They thought it rather stupid. I often wondered whether, had a horse played the leading role in it instead of a white rabbit, their verdict might be different. Thackeray's The Rose and the Ring, a mature work for young children, they liked very much indeed. When they were out of humor with me, I was often called Gruffanuff, after the governess in the story. Margaret had one treasured work that was all her own. It was a thumbed and torn Penny Dreadful, a tale of blood and pirates she found one day in an old box at Glamis Castle. She uncurled and flattened its yellow pages and took great pains to repair it. For a time it was her favorite reading. She was very secretive about it and would not let anyone else see it. I had always borne in mind King George's instructions to me about the princess's handwriting, and had avoided the sloping script he so objected to. Lilibet wrote a good, clear hand, entirely characteristic, and later on so did Margaret. They were both good letter writers, and I always heard very regularly from them during the holidays. Music lessons were started early. Miss Mabel Lander began to come regularly to 145 Piccadilly. Lilibet was naturally musical and loved her lessons, but she hated to practice. Miss Lander was to find that Lilibet's wonderful memory and good ear were great drawbacks, and kept her from learning to read. So she so soon got off a tune by heart that she could pick out on the piano by herself the songs the barrel organs played and the butcher boys whistled. Margaret started music lessons at 7 and had a real gift, no doubt inherited from her other grandmother, Lady Strathmore, who had a great talent. We went to singing class in the Countess of Cavan's home in Princess Gate for some time, and the children loved it. It came to an end when we moved to Buckingham Palace, but I formed a madrigal society at Windsor during the war, and they continued at the palace until a year ago. Both children had delightful speaking and singing voices from the earliest age. Margaret could sing all the Merry Widow tunes long before she could talk. They both picked up tunes with amazing ease, and it was charming to hear them sing duets together. This was something that always gave the Duke a lot of pleasure and amazement. He had always found it so difficult to do anything in public. To his little girls it came with the greatest of ease. Margaret, had she been trained, would undoubtedly have become a very good singer. As it is, her undoubted talent has given immense pleasure to her parents' visitors in the family circle. She is a born comic into the bargain, and accompanies herself for these turns on the piano in an almost professional manner. Wireless was in its infancy then, and the children took little interest in it. But later, both were Itma fans, I don't know what that is, and great admirers of Tommy Hanley. Dinner was always a little earlier on the Itma night so that they would not miss any of it. They also liked much binding in the march. Okay, do you see what I do? Like sometimes, somehow my eyes will jump, and I won't even notice I'm doing it, but I'm somehow picking up a word from the line that's next and inserting it. Much binding in the march. The King and Queen are real radio fans. King George V was devoted to his grandchildren. He seemed to me to be especially fond of Lilibet. His own children had always been a little afraid of him, with his Victorian discipline, his quarter-deck voice, and his general strictness. Lilibet had none of these qualms. She was even, at times, a trifle patronizing. I remember on one occasion when he drew a rather unhandy picture for her. She stood at his elbow watching, encouraging him. "You are really not at all a bad drawer," she told him kindly. It was wonderful to see them together, the bearded old man and the polite little girl holding on to one of his fingers. When he was so ill, a part of the tonic his doctors recommended for his convalescence was her presence. She was then 4 years old. She went down with him to Bognor Regis. It was the first time she had ever been to the sea. She used to play about on the sand, while the old king sat in the sunshine watching her. We were supposed to go and play in the palace gardens whenever we cared to, but for some reason this was never a popular expedition and smacked too much of putting on good clothes and having to behave. The children infinitely preferred the small, smutty enclosure of Hamilton Gardens, perhaps just because it meant home. At this time, the whole family went up to Birkhall for the summer holidays. This is a small Stuart house built in 1715 on the banks of the River Muick, just outside Ballater in Scotland. It is Victorian inside, with pine wood furniture and masses of Landseers. Landseer had been Queen Victoria's drawing master in her childhood, and she was a great admirer of all of his works. The staircases are lined with spies' caricatures. Some of these caricatures have personal letters attached to the backs of them, and we spent many wet days reading them. There was hardly a great statesman from Victoria's time up to the present day not represented there, and these I found a great help with history. Birkhall is whitewashed outside and has a dark pine porch at the front door. Queen Victoria had these porches put up on all the royal houses so that she could get into her carriage without getting blown to pieces on windy days. The bedrooms are very simple and Victorian, with pine wood beds and old-fashioned washstands and the customary chinaware. In the king's bathroom, there is one text: "Cleanliness is next to godliness." As in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, there are 3 basins in a line, each with hot and cold water, one marked for teeth, one hands, and one face. When I went to Burke Hall, it was lit by oil lamps, and very smelly oil stoves were carried up to the bedrooms in bitter winter. Since then, it has been brought up to date. Just as her father and mother did before her, Princess Elizabeth now has Burke Hall as her summer residence. It has been given to her. Her children will play in the same nurseries she shared with her sister. All right, we are going to stop. We are going to stop there, and we will continue another day. Oh, what a relief. I'm so glad that we got back to it, because it's been a long time, and I was feeling a little bad, to be honest. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you very soon.